Jack and I spread the recording of the bass over a handful of evenings and daytimes, and took the time to get everything that we needed. And I finished editing the bass and the drums for all 8 tracks over the weekend just gone. I think it's a solid foundation for the guitars that will come next. Usually when I practice the pieces, I play along with the demos that I have. So it's a very different experience being able to spend some time with the actual drum and bass parts. And spending a bit of time with them does help to solidify what other instrumentation I might want to add, and also where certain guitar parts might need to be tweaked slightly, even if it's just how I physically play it rather than the actual note choice itself. So it was nice to get to that stage and be able to experience that. These days, with home recording being what it is, it's easy to DI an instrument like the bass guitar. But I thought that I'd have a crack at miking up Jack's amp at the same time. So I borrowed Gareth's D112 microphone, which would capture the bottom end nicely, and also experimented with the M160 mic that I got as more of a room mic. I set this all up in the spare room just next door. Treated it like a live room basically, and had Jack playing in here in the studio. It's interesting, that M160 microphone that I got, it's a ribbon microphone, and I got it specifically for recording the guitars, but it worked pretty nicely as a room mic for the bass as well, because it still captures a decent amount of the low end, but if you put it about a meter from the amp, it just had a nice air to it that I quite liked, and also being different enough from the sound of the D112, which was much closer, that I think it will work quite well on its own in a few places in the album where don't necessarily want the bass to be quite so dry and direct, like right in your face, you know? And of course we still got the DI for the flexibility as well. The other interesting thing that happened with editing it all was that I realised that I've come full circle in how I approach editing and tightening up audio, especially guitars. Because when I first started making music as a kid, I didn't know what a gate was or how to comp and align different takes to get a recorded performance, you know? So when I made an album with the band that I was in at school, I would manually and very awkwardly cut out all of the gaps and rests, and I mean all the gaps and rests in the guitars. Now, goodness knows how teenage me even had the patience to do it, but I would do it in all of the gaps, but not for artistic reasons, but because my setup at the time was very technologically primitive. I think I plugged straight into the soundcard at the back of my computer, so there was a lot of noise and interference in the signal. So it was just a necessity to try and limit the amount of weird squealing and crackling that there was in the sound. The one thing at least that I did know back then was that wasn't particularly desirable. And then I went to college and gained a bit more experience and developed a rather undue sense that I knew what I was doing. And for those years, I would use a gate. And, you know, obviously the audio below a certain threshold would get shut off, and that would make all the rests and gaps perfectly silent. And then I thought, that's what the goal was, make it sound like everything is on a grid and make it perfectly chopped off. And of course when I listen to that now, it sounds robotic and clinical. It doesn't sound good. So then around university and shortly after, when I first became self-employed, I would use a gate, but I might automate it a bit, so that it wasn't active during quieter sections, and if there were longer notes being held, they wouldn't necessarily get chopped off too early. And I might do a little bit of manual editing, but you know, broad strokes, fade outs at beginnings of ends of bits, that sort of thing. Nothing too serious. That was better, but I still think that I wasn't really seeing the forest for the trees, as it were. And so now doing this, I'm all the way back to editing manually again, and doing every single gap and rest, not necessarily silencing them all, only silencing where it needs to be, but doing it in a way where you're getting the best sort of performance out of it. try not to squeeze all the life out of all of the takes. Obviously, I'm aided in this instance by Jack's great playing. That having a good player on a good instrument makes a big difference. But the idea was to try and end up with a good sounding performance without touching a single plugin. So you've just got to edit it together, just a little bit of balancing things on the faders so nothing's too ridiculously loud while you're piecing it together, and you want it to sound like a good performance even when it's raw. I suppose that sounds a little bit silly in a way. Oh, you want it to sound good? What a novel concept. But I suppose that in a way, if it really were that simple, people wouldn't spend their entire lives trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm 33 and I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't really know exactly what I'm doing. So it's a strange contradiction in producing music that what you're doing, even when recording real players, is still, in regards to playing music and performing music, it's still pretty artificial. But you're doing everything in your power to make it not seem that way. You want people to see the whole painting, but not the brushstrokes, you know? Yeah, so now it's my turn in the hot seat, as it were. And like the bass, it's all going to be done in here with my amp and a simultaneous DI. I'm also going to be doing a little bit of acoustic guitar as well as electric, because I think that some of the tunes will benefit from that. When I mentioned using acoustic guitar to Gareth, he mentioned the Japanese band Toe, who are really good if you haven't listened to them. And I think there are a few places where, yeah, a similar kind of vibe is definitely what I'd like to bring out. So a little bit of acoustic guitar will happen as well. Just need to restring my PRS and check the setup, and I should be good to go. And when the guitars are sorted, hopefully the tracks will be in a place where any additional instrumentation can just be slotted in neatly. Or I will have made a horrible mess. We'll find out soon. Until next time.